Part 51. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 502. Consultation. So late. Archmage Novak stood up unhappily. As a spellcaster, night is a time for sleeping and recovering spells. Although you can use magic potion to withstand it, no one is willing to get up in the middle of the night. He mumbled as he arranged the potions and magic equipment, preparing to go out with the students. While cleaning up, he murmured to Gretel. "What's so exciting about this? A child is born without an anus, and treatment won't change the anus. Even if a hole is poked through, the person who comes back will still die." Puff. Poked through. Gretel was in danger and couldn't hold it back. This kind of treatment idea, well, it can't be said to be completely unreasonable. The child died in the end. Is it infection, or is it anal stenosis and difficulty in defecation? Or are there other complications besides anal atresia? He agreed twice, and soon he focused all his attention on the book he had read in his previous life. Pediatrics, Digestive System Diseases, Physiological and Anatomical Characteristics of Children's Digestive System, Intussusception, Hirschsprung disease. I'll go. No. It's not that he wants to improvise, it's just that he has never been cured of this disease in his previous life. Being born without an anus is medically called congenital anal atresia. Generally speaking, when a child is brought out of the obstetrics department and found to have problems, he is sent directly to the neonatology department and a pediatric surgeon is called to perform an operation. Going to the emergency department to change hands does not exist. Children with this kind of disease cannot fall into their hands. Even if they occasionally fall into the emergency department, it is not their job. Pediatric treatment is very different from adult treatment in terms of anatomical structure, size of instruments, precision of operation, and even anesthesia and medication. Even the practice certificates are not the same, so he would never dare to get started. Pediatrics doesn't have it, so quickly turned to surgery. Well, diseases of the colorectum and anal canal, congenital diseases of the rectum and anal canal, congenital anorectal malformations, we have it. Thank God, surgery has finally made a difference. Gretel concentrated his mind and read through the pages at a glance. Classification. Associated malformations. Clinical manifestations. Diagnosis. Treatment. Then, a paragraph of text came into view. Depending on the type of anorectal malformation, the treatment methods are also different, but all must be surgical treatment. Anorectal atresia should be operated on immediately after birth. Surgery now. Surgery now. This eliminates the need to consider physiology, pathology, biochemistry, and the like. If there is a conclusion in the medical book, just follow the conclusion. Gretel stood up immediately. Archmage Novak turned around and was about to leave. He was stunned when he saw this. "You can sleep peacefully, I'll just go and take a look." "Your Excellency, let me go with you." Greet did not dare to say, "Maybe I can help." The book states that anorectal malformations are often accompanied by other malformations, and the associated rate is 28% to 72%, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to take it off, he just said very cautiously. "I haven't seen this kind of disease before. Can you take me to see it?" Archmage Novak smiled. Magicians are always curious. Transformation mages see special animals and plants, protection mages discover attack methods that they have never seen before, and prophecy mages observe new stars. They would rather bring their own dry food than ever before. Yeti followed. When a healer sees a special disease, he or she must dig in and have a look at it despite the anger of the patient's family. He didn't stop him and took Gretel on the flying carpet and flew directly down the mountain. It was almost nightfall, and the entire city of Nevis was shrouded in darkness. Only Theatre Avenue was lit up as a strip of light, connected to the starry garden area. Within the scope of Igor's mystery lock, mid-level mages are prohibited from flying, but high-level mages are very loosely controlled. Archmage Novak flew without any pressure and explained to Gretel against the cool night wind. Viscount Calendar and his family are nobles who took root in Nevis before the city was founded. The names of their ancestors are also listed on the stone tablet at the beginning of the mountain road. The direct line of their family was also unlucky. One of their two sons was raised until he was 3 years old, fell into a pool and drowned, the other was scratched by a cat not long after he was born. He was cured of minor injuries with medical treatment at the time. After some time, suddenly convulsed and died. Now this is the third one. Well, the first one drowned, the second one got rabies, the third one was born. What the hell? According to the ancient Chinese saying, you have no virtue in your ancestors, or you are a father and mother who have no virtue, right? Greet silently cursed, and couldn't help but start to doubt whether his trip was necessary. Archmage Novak didn't want to go and sighed. They have a 15th level great magician in their family. So there is nothing we can do. We always have to take care of the feelings of our colleagues. The flying carpet flew down in the wind, and after a while, it stopped in front of a spacious mansion. It was already dark now, but the whole mansion was brightly lit. There were 7 or 8 gorgeous carriages parked at the door, with emblems hanging on the walls of each carriage. Greet lay down on the flying carpet and took a quick glance at it, and saw the holy emblems of the Temple of the God of War and the Temple of the Goddess of Spring. As for the Order of the God of Nature, it seems that none of them have carriages. Of course, Elderwood is not in the city either. In this late-night emergency, we can probably only catch anyone at the treatment center at the port and catch whoever he is. The flying carpet landed directly in the atrium. Greet followed Archmage Novak and quickly walked in. Soon, he walked into a large, gorgeous, and warm room on the second floor of the mansion. The inner room was full of people, the smell of blood was faint, and a young female priest walked in and out quickly. It was obvious that it was the mother's room, and moans and sobs could be heard constantly. In the outside room, there is a shrine of the spring goddess on the wall. An old man kneels in front of the statue and murmurs a prayer without looking back. A small round table was set up next to the shrine, covered with thick mattresses and covered with dark blue brocade. The child was placed on top, as if to bring him closer to the goddess's blessing. Several older, dignified-looking men stood nearby, talking quietly. Archmage Novak walked straight over. Immediately, someone turned half sideways to make way for him. Greet did not follow in a hurry. He looked around and saw many familiar people. There are priests from the god of war and priests from the goddess of springs, all of whom came to help during the anthrax epidemic. Also, Brother Matthew, Greet greeted the priest of the god of nature in a low voice. What's going on now? How is the child? I've seen it, but there's nothing we can do. Pastor Matthew also came here out of kindness. Of course, there was also a consultation fee of 500 gold coins per night. He whispered to Greet. It has been more than 2 hours since the baby was born. So far, I have not defecated, and I have not dared to give him water or milk. Seeing that everyone can only stay here, and occasionally use magic to comfort the baby. His expression gradually darkened. Greet listened carefully, and found that the child's voice was already hoarse, and it was obvious that he had not stopped crying until now. It was normal. After more than 2 hours, there was no feeding, no meconium passing, and no one even held him. The child was obviously uncomfortable. If you keep crying like this, I'm afraid you will suffer from electrolyte imbalance. Archmage Novak approached carefully, bent down to observe, discussed with a few people next to him for a while, and also shook his head. In the end, he could only cast a hypnotic spell on the child, which was better than nothing. The baby finally calmed down. Several high-level healers looked at each other, and for a moment, they all let out a long sigh. Can I just go over and have a look? Gretel lowered her voice and asked Pastor Matthew. The people standing next to the child were obviously bosses at level 10 or above. If he goes there, it's impossible not to show him, but if the other party is more resistant, he will go to Archmage Novak first. Come on, it's okay. We've all seen it. Pastor Matthew sighed softly. Not to mention the big guys, even the mid-level and low-level healers they brought were looked at one by one. It was obvious that the owner had become seriously ill and sought medical treatment. Greet walked over relieved. He bowed slightly first, greeted the bosses with his eyes, and quickly observed the child. The skin is rosy, the limbs can be flexed and extended, and the cry was heard just now, and the voice was quite loud. At a glance, I didn't see any symptoms like jaundice. If congenital anal atresia is not taken into account, in terms of neonatal score, the score is actually quite high. Her belly was bulging, and there were traces of dirt around her mouth and on the brocade. A caregiver stood next to her, staring nervously at the child, ready to wipe away the vomit. Anorectal malformation, what method should be used to explore the position of the rectum? For X-ray, you need to lift the child upside down. For B ultrasound, you need to apply oil on the child. Forget it, let's do it in one step. The most common malformations associated with anorectal malformations are urogenital malformations, followed by spinal malformations, especially sacral vertebrae malformations. Then there are other parts of the digestive tract, such as intestinal atresia. If you are unlucky, you may have a heart malformation. Greet always remembered that not long before he traveled through his past life, the director of the neonatology department personally treated a child with congenital anal atresia, rectovestibular fossa fistula, right renal absence, and spinal tethering deformity. Later, the child was discharged from the hospital successfully. Before he traveled through time, he had safely grown to 10 years old. If the child in front of him was really that sick, he would have no choice but to give in and pretend that he had never been here today. Greet took out the miniature oak staff on his chest and showed the small snake on the head of the staff to the bosses. Can you let me take a look? This is the totem spirit of my contract, an incorporeal creature. I want it to enter the child's body and explore the situation inside the body. You? Who are you? The old man in front of the shrine suddenly spoke. He had just finished praying, stood up from the statue, and turned to the crowd. He frowned slightly and looked at Gretel, obviously a little suspicious. Before Archmage Novak could speak, a god of war bishop present had already taken over the conversation. He is Gretel Nordmark, a disciple of the Lord of Thunder. He has some unique insights in healing. Disciple of the Lord of Thunder? The legendary mage is indeed famous enough, but the evocation mage has nothing to do with healing. Before the Lord Bishop could continue, on the other side of the shrine, a young man quickly stepped forward and explained in a low voice beside the old man. Greet was far away and could only faintly hear a few familiar terms such as penicillin, infectious disease hospital, and smallpox. The old man's eyes immediately softened. He took a deep look at Gretel, as if he wanted to imprint his appearance in his heart, and then looked at the child beside the shrine and sighed. Okay, go and have a look. 3,000 words. Completed another update. Today, I got a debuff in my eyes. I applied an inappropriate essence and my eyes kept crying it's finally done. I'm going to take a shower and sleep to nourish my eyes. Good night. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 503. The old man kneeling in front of the shrine is obviously a powerful figure in the family. He agreed, and no one around him objected, including the child's father and relatives of the child's mother, who all remained silent. Well, Someone has decided on my favorite family group. What I like the most is when someone makes the decision with one word, and everyone on the sidelines shuts up. I was most afraid that the patient was in urgent need of rescue. The eldest son said that he needed an operation, the eldest daughter said that conservative treatment was the best, and the second daughter asked the doctor to explain it again, but no one came to pay. After procrastinating and procrastinating, it was difficult to get a result, but there was no result. Rescue is necessary. Greet silently half-closed his eyes and activated the spirit of contract. A small snake with black stripes on a white background swam out from the oak staff, soared into the air and approached the baby. Just as he was about to sink into the body, the old man suddenly spoke to stop him. Etc. Gretel opened her eyes and looked at him. The old man turned his head and glanced back at the shrine, then turned to Gretel with a slightly embarrassed look on his face. "Can you change a room?" Greet almost laughed. "Understood. The spirit that controls the contract is regarded by you as the god of nature, or the power of any god. The healer is also a magician. You don't want the goddess of the spring to watch, do you? It is said that the sight of the gods is far-reaching, and you can't just change rooms. How do you believe this belief? But okay, this small request is based on the thoughts of the patient's family, and it is completely no problem." The crowd moved to the next door in great numbers. This room is much smaller than the hall next to it. Except for a few big guys above level 10, no one else is embarrassed to squeeze in. Only Pastor Matthew was called in by Greet. "Brother Matthew, give me a hand." He handed Matthew the fountain pen oak stick, sat down at the table, spread out the manuscript paper, and half closed his eyes. The little snake swam out silently and sank into the baby's body from between the legs. Soon, the oak staff stretched out a tree root, and rolled up the endless ink pen to sketch. The scene seen through the eyes of the virtual body is quite different from the scene seen directly by X-ray, B ultrasound, CT, MRI, or even the surgeon after opening the abdomen. The skin is next to the muscles, the fascia wraps the blood vessels and nerves, and the intestines travel under the mesentery. Without a pair of keen eyes and insufficient spatial imagination, even if you see it, you don't know what you see. Fortunately, Gretel had a solid foundation in his previous life and knew the anatomy by heart. While watching at the moment, he manipulates the endless ink pen to outline the situation inside the child. Well, with high anorectal atresia, the blind end of the rectum is already above the levator ani muscle. If surgery is performed, the rectum that needs to be freed will be longer in order to pull through the levator ani muscle and anastomose directly with the anal orifice below. I looked to the side and saw that there was indeed a rectovesical fistula. Greet controlled the endless ink pen and drew an ink dot at the corresponding point of the fistula. Fortunately, there are treatments available, so healing here is not difficult. In the previous life, with open wounds and fistulas, it would have been too difficult. Look at those patients who suffered from anal fistulas and suffered from life and death. Moving on, there is no abnormality in the sacrococcygeal area, which is great. The anatomical structure from the coccyx to the lumbar spine, including the nerves, is normal. There is no atresia or stenosis in the intestines. This child is very lucky. He has no missing kidneys and no other problems with the urinary system. What the hell is he looking at? I don't know. The entire intestine is drawn. How long is the human intestine? It seems to be so long, isn't it just that the bottom piece is missing? I need to draw so much. He's still drawing the heart. Is this the heart? It's so vivid. Is this really a disciple of the Lord of Thunder? Are you sure he's not a disciple of the immortal? Several big guys on the side were whispering. The child was still crying, and Greet sat upright with half-closed eyes, motionless. They had nothing to see but Greet's drawing paper. 1, 2, and after a while, 4 or 5 people stood in a semicircle, surrounding the desk. There are ink marks on the drawing paper, filling one page and changing it to another, thanks to Pastor Matthew's diligence, changing Greet's manuscript paper one by one. From the pelvic cavity to the colon, ileum, cecum, and the internal organs, the heart is specially described in detail. Continue upward, even the esophagus is drawn, turn around again, and carefully outline the anatomical structures near the rectum and anal canal. Pelvis, muscles, ligaments, fascia, blood vessels, nerves, lymph, kidneys, ureters, bladder, rectum. He drew 3 large pieces of paper the length and width of his forearm on the area of the baby's pelvic organs that was the size of a fist. The bosses bumped heads and looked at each other with bated breath for a long time before realizing that he was drawing 3 views of the same part. Slice from the front, slice from the side, slice crosswise. As for it being so troublesome, Archmage Novak whispered. But the Archbishop of the God of War Temple's eyes shone as he stretched out his hands and then retracted them and stretched them out. From the looks of it, if Gretel hadn't been afraid that these pictures would be useful, he could probably roll them up and put them in his pocket. I understand. Gretel half closed his eyes and sat upright for nearly an hour before opening his eyes and getting up. He turned to the old man who had made the decision before, with a serious face. I may be able to save this child, but I'm only half sure at best. Half. He actually said he was half sure of a disease that many high-level healers were helpless to treat. Pastor Matthew took a breath of air. The other people present were all high-level healers. They did not lose their composure like him, but they exchanged solemn looks. Archmage Novak was the first to ask. How do you plan to treat it? The conscience of heaven and earth, he brought this little guy, but don't reach out just to show off or out of a moment of unbearability. If the treatment fails, even if others are concerned about the Lord of Thunder, there will be some minor trouble. The room was filled with silence. 5 or 6 pairs of eyes focused on Greet. The old man who had decided to let Greet investigate muttered, looking forward to and worried at the same time. It would be nice to hear the treatment ideas first, but most mages have a proud temperament. If they are asked to explain, will they feel distrusted and die in anger? Especially since this healer is young and is a disciple of the Lord of Thunder. Such a person will probably have a bad temper. Greet, on the other hand, has no idea of I am a spellcaster, I am the boss, whatever I say should be done. Doctors explain to patients' families that this is a matter of course and they have long been used to it. He raised his hand slightly, and a drawing immediately floated up and hung in front of everyone's eyes. Look, the child's rectum is here. Under normal circumstances, the rectum should grow all the way down to the bottom, which is the anus. He gestured vaguely on the drawing and moved his fingers down along the rectum. Move to edge. But now, the rectum has not grown this long, so we have to make an incision in the skin, pull the rectum down to the outside, and then cut it open and sew it together with the skin. The whole room went silent for a moment. Gretel's words were very simple and everyone could understand them. However, after thinking about it for a moment, more questions emerged. Can the rectum be pulled down? Will it break? Oh, no, the rectum itself is elastic and will not break. But the premise is that the rectum and the things around it, blood vessels, nerves, omentum, lymph, are all separated. Otherwise, it will really happen. Something happened. Pull it down and sew it together with the skin. Can the child poop normally? Will it keep leaking? This won't happen either. I just checked and there is still a sphincter in the child's anus. Greet bent down slightly and patted the baby. The child was suddenly awakened and cried loudly. He pressed his finger on the place where the anus was and turned to the old man. You see, there is a little bulge here, and you can feel the impact. If you connect the rectum here, and the muscles contract, you can control defecation. A group of people took turns to come up and touch it, and nodded. Immediately afterwards, there is the next question. There was no opening here originally. If I cut it open by force, would it be impossible to pull it out? The anus needs to be continuously expanded later. The healer's questions gradually ceased. The old man looked at the picture Greet had drawn carefully and asked him seriously. Why do you say you're only half sure? What's the danger? First of all, the child is too young. Gretel took a deep breath. Even if the treatment can stop the bleeding and relieve pain in time, I'm not sure he can survive the damage caused by the surgery. The healers all nodded. Treatment, growth, and healing all consume the body's own strength. It's normal for such a young child to not survive. Secondly, when a child is just born, the blood vessels and nerves next to the rectum are only as thick as a hair. If even a little bit is damaged during the incision, separation, and pulling process, the child's future recovery and defecation will be greatly affected. The old man nodded in understanding. Although he doesn't know what nerves are, he can still understand that the younger the child, the thinner the intestines, and the smaller the blood vessels. I thought about separating two hair-thick things without damaging them at all. Even if he is a level 12 great knight with sharp eyes and steady hands, thinking about this difficulty can't help but give him a headache. Finally, this is my first time to do this kind of surgery. I'm not familiar with it, so it's especially easy for problems to occur. Greet's words are absolutely true. He only performed emergency surgeries that were fatal, such as liver suturing, spleen removal, kidney removal, and even intestinal suturing. He had done it very skillfully in his previous life. But further down the line, an anaplasty. Leave all the things that are not urgent and life-threatening until the anorectal department comes to take over. Speaking of which, the time in his previous life when he was most familiar with the anatomical structure of the rectoanal canal was when he suffered from mixed hemorrhoids and was lying in the anorectal department of his own hospital. Forget it, it's hard to look back on the past. Gretel shook his head and confessed the last influencing factor. Also, even if it is saved, the child will still need to undergo anal dilation treatment for a long time, which will last at least 6 months to a year. Treatment or not depends on your decision. Reading the paper, even if children with anal atresia are cured, they still have to undergo follow-up anal dilation treatment for a long time. The quality of life of the children and their parents is lower than that of the general population. All living beings suffer, alas. I weakly stretch my claws to ask for a few votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 504. An operation, to do it or not to do it, is a question worth considering. If you don't do it, there is a 100% chance that the child will die. If you do it, there is a 50% chance that the child will still die after enduring considerable pain. Even if you can survive successfully, the later recovery will still take half a year and a year. Do or not? The old man looked at Gretel, then at the child on the table, frowning in thought. The child's mother is the girl he has grown up watching and treating as his granddaughter. After marrying into the family, she is kind-hearted and harmonious, and has always been liked by the whole family. She had already lost 2 sons and had just given birth to her third. Now she was told that the child would be given up because she was afraid that she would not be able to withstand the blow. However, after giving her a glimmer of hope, she was then allowed to bear the pain of loss. Moreover, there was not much time left for him to decide. Until now, the child has never had a sip of milk or a sip of water, and will only become weaker and weaker. Obviously, procrastinating it forever will only cut off the child's life. He let out a long sigh and looked at Gretel again. As soon as his eyes glanced at him, he was immediately startled. Gretel was sitting at the table, his eyes seemed to be open and closed. The fingertips of both hands were gently placed together, and the silent phantom in front of him outlined the muscles and organs inside the human body, constantly changing. Sometimes it opens, sometimes closes, and sometimes spreads like blisters, and the lower body of a baby appears again. "What are you doing?" "Mock surgery." Greet answered in a low voice without opening her eyes. He can give a general idea of this operation, but he cannot perform it. There are 3 surgical approaches written in surgery. Which one should I choose? Abdominal? Through the perineum? Or, choose the posterior sagittal approach? What position should the baby be placed in, how long should the incision be, and which layers of muscles need to be stretched? How to determine the position of the sphincter during surgery so that the rectum can accurately pass through the gap in the sphincter? Is it necessary to correct electrolyte imbalance before surgery, and is it necessary to decompress the gastrointestinal tract to prevent vomiting? How to deal with the fistula? The rectal wall is quite thick. How to let it pass through the narrow levator ani muscle and sphincter complex? Should I cut off part of it, and if so, how much should I cut off? Each question needs to be combined with his understanding of the anatomical structure and the baby's growth and development process, and he needs to read the book on the spot. Histoembryology, pediatrics, surgery, local anatomy, systematic anatomy. The sooner a plan is decided, the sooner the surgery can be performed and the less damage the child will suffer. The old man was silent. After a moment, he asked in a deep voice. "You haven't decided yet, haven't you? It's your business whether it's determined or not. It's my own business to be 100% prepared." Greet said softly with her eyes closed. The next moment, several thin green vines sprouted from his fingertips. With 2 pricking sounds, the vine dug a hole in the brocade on the table, swaying gently, and crawled under the brocade weakly but firmly. The old man frowned. He looked deeply at Gretel, at his calm and focused brows, at the winding vines at his fingertips, and at the drawings with ink marks on the table at his hand. Once upon a time, he himself was a young knight who was ordered to conduct reconnaissance behind enemy lines and saw a small group of enemy troops slaughtering a village. If you rush out, you may destroy the opponent, or you may alert the enemy and cause the mission to fail. If you don't rush out, the sight in front of you will really make people grind their teeth. Only the captain can issue the order to attack. At that time, he was just like Gretel now, silently adjusting the saddle and bridle, tightening the girth of the war horse, and wiping the weapons he carried. Whether or not to issue an order is the captain's decision. It is his own business to be prepared. He breathed in deeply and exhaled deeply. Then, hold down the desktop and lean slightly towards Gretel. "Mage Nordmark. I leave this child to you. Don't worry." Greet opened his eyes and looked directly at him. "I can't guarantee 100% success, but I will try my best." The group moved to the hall. Archmage Novak releases the mage sanctuary to isolate dust that may fall from the air. The High Bishop of the Temple of the Fountain Goddess casts a soothing spell to ensure that the baby does not feel pain during the operation. The Bishop of the Temple of the God of War enthusiastically stood next to him, and followed Gretel's instructions to help position the baby, placing the baby prone, with its legs curled up in a frog position, exposing the surgical site. Elevate the bottom of the belly in preparation for surgery. And Archmage Novak, after releasing the operating room, squatted next to Gretel and started playing with the animals. Can you catch me a frog?" Frog. In this season, the old man had no intention of rejecting it, nor did he ask what he wanted to do. He turned around and looked around. "Can a larger animal be allowed? Like a sheep? Or a pig?" "Bring a sheep." Gretel sighed. "Okay, although the principle of animal experimentation is to use lower animals instead of higher animals, but their family has money anyway, and they have to eat these sheep anyway." The sheep was quickly led over. While Greet was watching people shaving the sheep, he ordered people to shape zinc sheets and copper sheets, make zinc copper bows, and soak them in physiological saline. Your Excellency the Archmage. Your Excellency the Archmage, please come here and help me. Greed took it upon himself to cut open the skin of the lamb leg, separate the muscle bundles, and use a zinc copper bow to stimulate the muscles. Well, the effect is not satisfactory, maybe the current is too small. Your Excellency, Archmage, please use the smallest beam of electricity and hit it on the muscles, just make the muscles contract. Don't injure them. Okay, get out of the way, I'll do it. There was a crackling sound, and the exposed muscles of the lamb leg were slightly charred to the naked eye. Hey, be gentle. A little gentler. The Archmage is indeed an Archmage. After 3 attempts, the required current intensity has been accurately grasped. Gretel was still not worried, so he lifted up his trouser legs and asked him to try it on himself. Are you a fool? You are already a 5th level mage. Even if you don't deliberately resist, your magic resistance is higher than others. It's as if I don't get hit by static electricity in winter, Gretel complained silently. In the end, it was the host who solved the problem. There must be a brave man under a heavy reward. With an order, the 2 servants rolled up their sleeves for the Archmage to test. There was a crackling sound, and muscle twitching was visible to the naked eye, but no substantial damage was caused. After 2 consecutive tests were successful, Greed breathed a sigh of relief and turned to change clothes and wash hands. Okay, let's get started. Brother Matthew, pay attention to my movements. Wherever the knife cuts, the healing technique will follow. Don't let the wound bleed. Okay. Pastor Matthew summoned a vine and inserted it into the baby's mouth to the stomach to serve as a gastrointestinal decompression tube to prevent the baby from vomiting, choking, and coughing. Gretel concentrated on holding his breath, holding the scalpel in a pen-holding position. The baby's skin is delicate, and the pen-holding position is gentler and more flexible and accurate in operation than the bow-holding position. He made a mid-sagittal incision and made a single stroke. It starts from the tip of the coccyx and goes down to 1 centimeter behind the anal recess. Cut open the skin, use 2 smallest retractors, one on the left and one on the right, to pull it apart to both sides. Greet maintained the position of the hook, and Pastor Matthew used 2 vines to take it over to reduce Greet's operating burden as much as possible. Then, Master Novak, please use the smallest amount of electric current to stimulate the muscles inside the knife edge like you just did. The electricity crackled again. The baby's buttocks muscles immediately began to twitch, and his eyes were fixed on the knife edge. When he raised his hand, the mage's trick flew out. The direction of this circular contraction. That's right. This is the external anal sphincter. In previous lives, special muscles needed to be marked, which were usually stimulated with an electrical stimulator. There is no electric stimulator here, so we have to ask the Archmage to stimulate manually. If the Archmage's control level is still not good enough, he can only install a zinc copper bow, or set up his small hand-operated generator to adjust the current bit by bit. However, what is more convenient than the previous life is that there is no need to use silk thread or reagents such as melon to mark it. The magician's trick of zero-level magic, instant dyeing, rich colors, no damage to the tissue, easy to remove, really a good helper for doctors. Hey, if you undergo laparoscopic surgery or similar surgery in the future, you can also consider dyeing the relevant tissues. Greet secretly praised himself, flew out a few vines, and began to separate bluntly. Others only saw that his eyes were slightly closed, and vines as thin as hair penetrated into his muscles, and it took him a long time to move slightly. Only Greet himself knows what he is doing. Such a small place, the anal sphincter system, is composed of 4 groups of muscles. The subcutaneous layer of the external sphincter, the proximal levator ani muscle, the deep external sphincter, and the muscle complex consisting of the puborectalis portion and the deep fibers of the external anal sphincter. If it is a normal baby, the rectum should pass through these systems and go straight to the anus. However, in babies with anal atresia, the rectum is not fully developed and the anorectal hiatus is relatively small. Slow blunt dissection is required to expose the surgical field and create a gap for the rectum to pass. The top of the vine glowed slightly. The vines are as thin as hair and soft like spider silk. When exerted force, they can burst out with the power to topple stone slabs. Drill, push, pull, cut. Separating a gap of just 1 centimeter in diameter already made Greet sweat profusely. He closed his eyes and panted for a long time, then manipulated the vines to carefully drill in and began to separate the rectum. In the previous life, this statement would not have been enough. The distance between the blind end of the rectum and the anus is about 2 centimeters, and the length of the rectum that needs to be separated is about 3 to 5 centimeters. In other words, it takes such a long incision to have enough surgical field for operation. But Greet doesn't have to be like this. With the spirit of the contract providing vision and vines for operation, he could perform the separation operation steadily through the dark and narrow incision without cutting more skin, muscles, or even bones. This field of view is much more delicate and convenient than surgery under X-ray guidance. Moreover, there is no need to eat thread or wear a heavy lead suit. Perfect. 3,000 words. Another update with 10,000 rewards has been completed, only the last 3 are left. Today, the papers, atlas, and surgical instructions were opened together, and they were all different from each other. I was exhausted from checking them. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 505. Gretel closed his eyes slightly, and 5 vines floated out of each palm of his hands, clinging to his fingers and winding forward. Since becoming a 5th-level priest, especially since the intensive diagnosis and treatment in the following period, Greet has become more and more comfortable using vines. The 10 vines, like the extension of 10 fingers, move gently with the movements of the fingertips, drilling, piercing, hooking, scratching. Greet raised the corners of her lips slightly. It is really easy to go from frugality to luxury, but it is difficult to go from luxury to frugality. Compared with the mosquito-type vascular clamp used in the previous life, the movement of the vine is lighter and more agile, and the feedback is more accurate. Once you're used to vines, there's no way you can go back. In addition to not being able to touch the temperature, and of course, the vascular forceps can't touch it, those vines seem to be growing directly from the fingertips. Around Gretel, there was a circle of people standing around the table, and they didn't dare to express their anger. Watch as the thumb and index finger of his left hand clasp inward slightly, and then open slightly outward. The index finger of his right hand suddenly lifted up, retracted it, then immediately straightened it out and thrust out. The vines on the fingertips also tightened and thrust forward like a sharp sword. "What is he doing?" the old man asked in a low voice. Several high-level spellcasters shook their heads, but Pastor Matthew's eyes shone brightly. As a servant of the God of nature, he had never thought that the vines he was used to could make such delicate movements. On the fingertips of his left hand, 2 vines grabbed 2 bundles of muscles and separated them slightly to both sides. The vine on the index finger of the right hand shrank slightly with the movement of the fingertip, and then, like a poisonous snake with its head raised, it plunged into the gap between the 2 muscles. In Gretel's field of vision, or in other words, in the virtual snake's field of vision, the tip of the vine glowed slightly, which was a sign that it had been transformed by the magic of the demonized weapon. The vine swayed from side to side, tearing apart the fascia like silk, and drilled toward the blind end of the rectum. Rising, is it here? The field of view of the incorporeal little snake then rose, and it was level with the tip of the vine. It continued to rise, past what looked like a membrane, and penetrated. Dark green, slimy. Phew, meconium. That's right, we've reached the blind end of the rectum. Greet's right index finger was slightly bent, and the tip of the vine stopped, coiled in a circle, and made a small mark. Then, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. Green and smooth vines as thick as hair scrambled to get in. The 10 vines were like a delicate spider web, opening gently to wrap the slightly bulging blind end of the rectum. Gretel sighed and opened his eyes. Okay. Done. Several voices asked one after another. Greet shook his head silently and lowered his gaze. He put it in his chest pocket, stretched out a root from the oak staff, took out a vial from his space pocket, and brought it to his lips. Gretel took a cherished sip. A cool feeling rushed to his forehead, and he was refreshed. He felt that he had endless energy, and his control over the vines became more and more sensitive. He had already undergone an operation during the day, and another operation in the middle of the night. Without mental supplements, he really couldn't bear it. Next to Gretel, Archmage Novak glanced sideways at the old man. The old man raised his eyebrows and nodded lightly. Could it be that my family can't even afford a spiritual supplement? Don't worry, I will definitely return it to him. Gretel simply didn't have the energy to watch their lawsuits. He lowered his eyes again and entered a peaceful semi-meditative state. The battle has just begun. There are so many blood vessels around the rectum. The superior rectal artery, middle rectal artery, and inferior rectal artery are like a thin spider web, gently but tightly wrapping the rectum. Not to mention the internal rectal venous plexus and the external rectal venous plexus, named after plexus. You can imagine how troublesome this place will be once bleeding occurs. There are also nerves, lymph nodes, and various other organs, which will be touched by any big movements. His expression became serious unknowingly, and the movements of his fingertips were so gentle that they could not be seen without paying attention. In the previous life, when the blood vessels were anastomosed under the microscope, the amplitude was only this subtle. Free, blunt separation. The vines cling tightly to the outer wall of the rectum, leaving not even a millimeter of space. The tighter it is, the better it can avoid damaging other organs. The little snake first swam over and looked around to make sure there were no blood vessels or nerves. Then, the tip endowed with the devilized weapon characteristic dropped slightly to separate the rectal fascia and bladder fascia. Then, observe again, separate again, and swim upward without any hurry or slowness. There is a fistula here. Another vine rose from the fingertips. The glass wire with a diameter of less than 1 mm is rolled up and squeezed through the gap to reach the fistula tract. Greet's fingertips gently touched the end of the glass fiber, and the clean white light curved and flowed in along with the glass fiber. In the previous life, the fistula needed to be exposed, freed and ligated. If it was too troublesome, the rectal wall would be removed. In this world, a treatment for minor injuries is enough. Under the little snake's illusory gaze, the fistula on the bladder wall grew, closed, and disappeared. The vine retreated and carefully continued to free the outer wall of the rectum along the outside of the rectum, where there was a fistula and adhesions would inevitably occur. 1 mm, 2 mm, 3 mm. 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters. 3 centimeters. Is it long enough? Try it. The vine at the tip of the right index finger raised its head again. The sharp tip wanders to the blind end of the rectum and penetrates the underlying muscle layer like a small snake. Then there was another one, 2 vines, replacing the 2 thick silk threads, strangling the muscle layer and pulling it downwards. Well, it seems that the length is enough, and it can still remain loose when it is pulled to the anus. This is good, it will not cause scarring stenosis, and there is no need to loosen it anymore. The remaining 8 vines quickly retreated, surrounding the holes of the puborectalis muscle and anal sphincter, evenly arranged, and stretched outward. Support. Support. Open the opening wide to make way for the rectum to pass through. Don't be afraid of exerting too much force. The stretching ability of the sphincter is beyond ordinary people's imagination. As long as it doesn't cause muscle tear, just pull. Pulling through the section of the striated muscle complex, the treatment flashes again, fixing the rectum tension-free in the muscle ring. In the previous life, absorbable sutures would have been used here to slowly connect it together, but now, the treatment is clearly doing a better job. The blind end of the rectum is continued to be pulled downward. There was a silent commotion at the table. A pink intestine actually dragged out of the sparse holes made of green vines. Is it okay? Is it cured? Gretel shook his head slightly. He closed his eyes, calmed down the dizziness caused by the high-intensity operation, and said in a hoarse voice, "Brother Matthew, the attractor." "Okay." Pastor Matthew took out a seed again. Holding it in the palm of his hand, he compared the diameter of the rectum that was dragged out of the body. A thin hollow vine grew out in the wind. Greet made a cross-shaped incision at the blind end of the rectum and inserted the vine without any space. At the other end of the vine, a thin whirlwind replaced the suction device, sucking out the meconium cleanly. Call. Finally pulled it out. Thank God. There was a sound of relieved sighs all around. Gretel watched the meconium flow out closely, rinsed it with saline solution, and then rinsed it with holy water to prevent infection. Then, the perianal skin is incised and anastomosis begins. Even at this point you cannot relax. The internal venous plexus and external venous plexus around the anus are so annoying, and blood will surge if you are not careful. In my previous life, when we were undergoing surgery together, we often heard the anorectal surgeon complain. The scalpel was gleaming with cold light, and 10 green vines were swinging back and forth like butterflies piercing flowers. Cut the skin flap and strictly control the depth of the incision so as not to damage the underlying veins. Very good, the depth and curvature of this knife are good, and the position indicated by the little snake is also very accurate. Before the blood could gush out, the tissue forceps formed by the mage's hands had already closed the cut rectal wall. The healing technique fell, very good, it was successfully closed, and then the next piece was cut. One more piece. One more piece. Finish. A perfect circle. A smile appeared on Greet's face. He stretched out his fingertips, and a vine raised its tip knowingly, and gently poked the child's anus. Under the gaze of everyone, the newly sutured skin shrank inward, showing a circular wrinkle. All right. Gretel softly uttered 2 words. He quickly put the scalpel and glass fiber into the space bag. These 2 need to be disinfected at high temperature and can be used again later. As for the vines, he just waved them away. Seed. No more. Anyway, if it's not enough, you can still plant it. Anyway, with some magic, it only takes 1 day from planting to harvest. Anyway, as long as the seeds are soaked in disinfectant, sterile operation can be guaranteed. Is it really better? It's really good. The high-ranking bishop of the Temple of the Spring Goddess unlocked the tranquility spell. The bishop of the God of War couldn't wait to pick up the child, turned it over in his hands. The baby started crying, but the old man was full of smiles, stretched out his hands to pick up the child, and turned it over. Look. Newborn babies are passed from one person to another. In this group of high-level spellcasters and high-level warriors, everyone's eyes were filled with wonder. Really cured? Is this cured? Just these few vines were inserted into the body for more than half an hour, but there seemed to be no big movement, so it was cured? The extraordinary power was released without hesitation, flowing from their fingertips to the child's skin, traveling around the body and returning to their fingertips. Soon, the healers were delighted to discover. It's really cured. The extraordinary power flows smoothly without any obstruction. Amid the joy that filled the room, Gretel was exhausted and threw himself on the table. After an unknown amount of time, he felt someone forcefully shake him awake. In the darkness of the room, only Archmage Novak's aquiline nose shone brightly in front of him. "Hey, Gretel, wake up. The master is asking you what you want. Giving money directly seems to underestimate you." "Whatever." Gretel's mind was buzzing and he couldn't turn around at all. After being shaken twice by Archmage Novak, he became even more dizzy and blurted out according to the habit of his previous life. "If it doesn't work, just give me a banner, just write a few words and hang it up at the hospital. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's almost the end of the month, remember to leave your last monthly ticket to me. Thanks to @Bibashao for tipping 10,000 starting coins. Thanks to @BookFriend 201707220421454999 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 506. Greet's successful treatment this time can be said to have become famous in one battle. As the clergy and the guests that night went back to their homes, his fame quickly spread among the nobles of Nevis. "Have you heard? That Nordmark mage cured the Kotarin family's youngest son. Have you heard? The new heir of the Kotarin family was born without any of those things, and was cured by the healer who discovered cowpox. Have you heard?" Several bishops from the great temples came over at that time, and they all said that there was no way to save them and they could only wait to die. This Nordmark mage took action and actually saved him. He is worthy of being the Lord of Thunder. Disciple. Wait a minute, what does this have to do with the Lord of Thunder? I remember that the evocation system is not good at healing spells. Hey, even if the legendary mage is not good at it, he is still better than you. No matter what, Greet's reputation has skyrocketed. Not only did the value soar, but also areas he had never touched before were eliminated. In the past, Greet's reputation for treatment was mostly that as a magician, he could do some weird things. The effects of these things can be fully achieved by therapeutic techniques, and they are fast, efficient and painless. Penicillin, cowpox, public toilets, and hot water supplied by biogas are only provided to the poor. Noble gentlemen, you don't even bother to order them. But this time, the archbishops were helpless and the child who was judged to be dead was actually saved by Gretel. And it is said that the entire treatment process was silent from beginning to end. The highest level divine spell used is the third level tranquility spell. Since ancient times, except for the limited wishing technique or even the higher level grand wishing technique, who can save a person from a disease of this level alive? In short, the degree of fermentation and the speed of spread of the matter were far beyond Gretel's imagination. Moreover, after 2 days of word-of-mouth spread and silent fermentation, Gretel's reputation as a miraculous doctor was suddenly exploded by an incident. When Gretel was sent back to the Mage Tower by Archmage Novak, he had a good sleep in the Mage Tower to restore his energy and adjust to the jet lag. When he climbed to the hospital the next day, he was shocked to see a Red Cross flag coming from afar. The flag was brilliant. Under the sun, I could see the flag twinkling from afar, as if it was made of gold and silver thread, or was it enchanted with a permanent flashing spell? The flag is getting closer. Not long after, Gretel saw 2 knights, one on the left and one on the right, riding side by side. One is holding a Red Cross flag high, and the other is holding a flag with complicated patterns. It seems to be the battle flag of a certain noble family. Greet's performance in heraldry cannot be said to be average, it can only be said to be a complete mess. After all, the Magic Council does not take this test. Mages rely on their spellcasting ability to conquer the world, and do not pay much attention to the pedigree of nobles. Therefore, Greet looked up and down at the family battle flag several times, but felt that it looked a little familiar. Is this circle of wheat ears, pine branches, or thorns? Is there a flower here, a narcissus or an iris? And this animal, it would be too difficult for him to distinguish whether it is a tiger or a lion. The two knights were followed by a group of cavalry, and behind them, a group of servants in noble livery escorted a carriage. Arriving at the entrance of the hospital, the two knights holding the flag were one step away from each other. Viscount Cotteron stepped out from the crowd, took the Red Cross flag from the knight's hands, and held it high. "Dear Master Nordmark, thank you for saving my child 2 days ago. On behalf of the family, I am sending you a banner." Pennant. Gretel slowly opened his mouth. "What, a pennant? You used this white brocade as the base, and used red brocade to affix a cross on the boss. The reflective flag can be seen from a long distance. Is it called a pennant? This is not what I want. What I want is that kind of. The kind with dark red suede as the base and golden edges, with words such as noble medical ethics, superb medical skills, benevolent heart and benevolent skills, wonderful hands to rejuvenate written on it, can be taken by the medical department and hung on the wall of the clinic." The pennant. Seeing his astonishment, the smile on Viscount Cotteron's face froze. "What are you doing like this? Don't you want the pennant or something for yourself? According to your status, it is very strange to use a brocade flag. Unless you ask for it by name, we won't give it to you." Although nobles' castles and armies have the habit of using flags, the materials are ordinary. Those who had no money used linen flags, and those who had money used silk flags. As for the damask flag, apart from the royal family, there are only a handful of families with such wealth. And magicians prefer secret marks. After all, magicians don't lead an army. At best, they have a few followers around them. Having people follow them wherever they go holding a flag seems to them to be a very stupid thing. When you ask for a brocade flag, are you actually a fugitive prince of a certain country, or are you, as a magician, not treating money as money at all? But Viscount Cotteron had to send the pennant. After all, it was their family who asked first. After all, after their family asked, Gretel asked for this. If I had known this, I might as well have just sent the money. However, you really can't send money directly. Their family asked Archmage Novak to ask about the remuneration. Indeed, it was because the remuneration was a bit difficult to calculate. There is a well-established algorithm for calculating treatment costs among nobles and spellcasters. For example, a potion for treating serious injuries is priced at 750 gold coins, so a standard spellcasting is the same price. If you hire a high-level healer, the reward will increase appropriately according to the level of the patient. If, like the Viscount's family, they invite someone to see a doctor late at night, then even if they are not cured or don't even offer treatment, they will at least pay for the carriage fee. But, Gretel, how much should I give this time? When it comes to casting spells, apart from spawning vines, he has no obvious spellcasting actions. At best, he can only heal minor injuries with a few shots. To say that there is no spellcasting, it is obvious that everyone sees the consumption of Gretel's treatment and the results of the treatment. This is not easy to estimate. And it doesn't look good to give money directly. For example, if a priest is invited to visit a doctor, the patient is sent directly to the temple in the name of consecration to God. The probability of asking a magician to give you magic materials is actually higher than giving money. Direct payment and delivery. It seems like others are short of money. After all, Gretel is also a disciple of the Lord of Thunder. You can't look down on him so much. I have no choice but to do my best to get what the other party wants. Not only must it be done well, but it must be produced as soon as possible. If you delay it for 10 days and a half, a month, or 2, do you want to send it, or do you not want to send it? In order to make this flag, the stewards and staff of Viscount Cotteron's family racked their brains and scratched their scalps. How big should the flag be? What is the crest of the Nordmark family? Should the family emblem be embroidered, or should it be woven when weaving? There is another sentence to be written on the flag. What should it be? In the end, after taking into account the beauty, sophistication, and manufacturing speed, the Viscount Cotteron family could only come up with a hasty plan. Use plain white brocade as the base, click it, and cut off the centerpiece. Cut a cross out of the pure red brocade and sew it directly on it. As for embroidering a sentence, forget it, wait a moment. Make the flag and send it quickly to show your sincerity. After the two parties have communicated well, find an embroiderer to embroider it. After all, silk is already expensive, and brocade is even more expensive. Such a 3-foot long and 2-foot wide banner costs thousands of gold coins, so it would be better not to waste it. Greet was at a loss for a second, then quickly put on a smile. He quickly walked down the steps and took the banner with both hands. Viscount Calderon climbed the steps side by side with him, turned around, and the two stood side by side. In front of the onlookers, he skillfully showed a bright smile. All it took was for someone to come up and take a photo. Alas, there is no medical office or camera in this world. Okay, no matter how far this pennant goes, its publicity effect is still good enough. Gretel looked over the heads of the knights and servants. The place across the road was crowded with people, and there was a crowd of bosses standing there. There are some who are in rags, and there are also some who are magnificent. It seems that the Viscount's family sending the banner was loud enough and attracted a large number of onlookers. Hang the pennant in the lobby today. Arrange a special person to come in and tell them the recent case when a patient comes in. The Viscount family is still very good. Not only did he parade through the city under the family flag and bring a banner to Gretel, but he also hauled a few carriages and gifts along the way. Viscount Calderon was delighted with the birth of his son, and his face was full of smiles. These things are donated to the Medical Center for research on therapeutic techniques and to provide food and daily necessities for poor patients. Please don't refuse and let our family do a little bit of charity in the city. So this is the medical fee? Well, it is also a common practice for nobles and wealthy people to pay for medical consultations by donating to charity. Gretel got an unexpected fortune and was in a good mood. He smiled and invited Viscount Cotteron to come in. As for the donor, of course the treatment will be better. Even if we don't expect him to donate, we still expect him to publicize it more and attract more donations. Greet pointed along the way and showed the Viscount various details in the hospital. There are antlers mounted on the wall, 8th level Warcraft material. There are consulting rooms lined up next to the hall, each of which has a formal priest sitting in the clinic. There is a heavily guarded backyard, and a dozen magicians and wizard apprentices are busy coming in and out, developing a rabies vaccine. Whether His Excellency the Viscount meant it sincerely or was extremely flattering, he exclaimed again and again. After walking around, he found a deserted place and pulled Gretel mysteriously. Mage not Mark, can you treat diseases that cannot be cured by healing techniques or that are ineffective? It depends on the situation. I am only a level 5 priest. Then, I have friends whose injuries are not cured well. Can I introduce them to you? Gretel's eyes lit up. A new patient has been introduced. There are new nobles and rich people who can collect money and raise money for the treatment costs of poor patients. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Please give me the final monthly ticket at the end of this month. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 507. Gretel waited eagerly for Viscount Cotteron, or other nobles, or other wealthy people to come to see a doctor. So what, I have a friend, everyone knows it. It's a pity that I waited and waited. The first day passed, the second day passed, the third day passed, and nothing happened. The hospital is still empty, with at most 3 to 5 patients coming in every day, and they are still the kind that can be treated with just one shot of treatment. I don't know if everyone still needs to inquire more and verify, or if I have a friend who is suffering from what kind of disease. I am too embarrassed to come to the door and have to wait for the opportunity when there are few people. In the end, it was my family members who repeatedly asked about the treatment situation at that time. So at that time, everyone really said it couldn't be cured, Cyrilla asked enthusiastically. Gretel answered for the third time. Actually, it's not necessarily that it can't be cured, I guess the limited wishing technique should be able to cure it. Well, I don't know if the medical technique can do it. While searching for his own knowledge, he made gestures and explained to Cyrilla. Thanks to the daily teachings of the Lord of Thunder, Gretel has acquired a lot of fragmented knowledge of high-level magic. There is still something to talk about with Miss Silver Dragon. The priest's 6th level spell, medical spell, introduces positive energy to heal diseases and injuries and end the bad conditions suffered by the target. The 7th level spells of warlocks and wizards, limited wishing spells, can achieve various types of spell effects. However, based on the principles of magic, Greet felt that medical magic should not be able to cure congenital malformations. After all, no matter how you introduce positive energy, your body has already grown like this, and it will still be like this even if it grows again. What about the limited wish-making technique? The limited wishing technique should probably work. Gretel thought and answered slowly. Because what the limited wishing spell achieves is the caster's request, I need to make something like this. If he thinks clearly enough, he should be able to make a wish successfully. As long as the practitioner has a clear goal and does not just let the body grow on its own and grow into what it should be without the interference of disease, poison, or negative energy. If you want to grow an anus, you can still grow an anus. Of course, if it is combined with other malformations, such as intestinal atresia, congenital heart disease, esophageal atresia, lack of other organs, etc., then, if you don't check it out in advance, you may need more than one limited wishing spell. But the levels of those two spells are so high, Cyrilla thought about it carefully and happily came to the conclusion. As for Gretel, you can do it with 2nd and 3rd level spells. So Gretel is the most powerful. This. Greet sweated profusely. Medicine is never that easy. There are some things that magic cannot do, and neither can modern medicine. Not to mention rare diseases, let's talk about Alzheimer's disease. He really can't do that. So when will there be a new patient? Cyrilla confirmed Gretel's ability and squatted at the door of the hospital with him, waiting eagerly. It's always been bruises, broken skin, bleeding, colds and coughs, etc. The illnesses will be cured as soon as the treatment is applied. This, I don't know this either. Alas, the hospital's level is still not high enough, and its reputation is still not high enough. It's not like in my previous life, when I was in a well-known tertiary hospital in a provincial capital city. As long as I sat there, a steady stream of difficult and complicated diseases would come to my door. Patients come here out of admiration, are transferred by lower-level hospitals, and are transferred here due to poor treatment in lower-level hospitals, dragging their families with them, thousands of miles away. What needs to be advertised and publicized does not exist. Miss Yinlong waited and walked around, and the ground at the entrance of the hospital was thinned by her. No, her original shape was not revealed, but she still didn't wait for the patient to come to the door. Out of boredom, she went to drag Gretel back. By the way, how do you use all the weird things you bought back at the expo last time? They have been piled there, gathering dust. You said you could make that fruit into something delicious, and I tasted it. When I taste it, it's very bitter and astringent. Greet shook off sweat. That, he came back from the expo and really plunged into research, putting the rare gadgets he bought behind his head. However, you can't blame him. Some of these things, such as rubber, he handed over to Mr. Norwood, but he has not yet produced any results. For example, cinchona bark has no different uses than ordinary tree bark when there is no malaria, as long as it is well preserved. For example, he has already peeled half of the sunflowers and asked Miss Anavia to find a place to plant them. He hopes that they will produce many seeds in the autumn, and there will be a steady stream of seeds to eat in the future. As for the cocoa fruit, did you just grind the cocoa beans and eat them? Yes, Cyrilla said matter-of-factly. I asked the cook to add sugar, milk, and all kinds of other things, but she couldn't get rid of the bitter taste. It tastes terrible. Con, Cyrilla, this is not how cocoa fruit is eaten. It has to be roasted. Greet raised his head from the experimental table in a daze, shaking his head left and right vigorously. Seeing that no patients would come today, he rolled up his sleeves and decided to take a half-day off to change his mind. Cyrilla, let's go. Go back to the Mage Tower. Returning to the Mage Tower, Cyrilla had already killed 2 of the cocoa fruits purchased earlier. Fortunately, there are still 7 or 8 left, enough for novices to waste. Greet opened one of them and found that it had cracks before. Under the constant temperature and humidity of the Mage Tower, the cocoa beans inside had turned into coffee color. Beside her, Cyrilla covered her nose and jumped out. Hey! What does it smell like? There was a sour smell. Strictly speaking, it was the smell of smelly feet in the medical student dormitory in the previous life. Gretel recalled the videos he had watched during the night shift in his previous life, and was satisfied that the fermentation level should be almost complete. Next is drying. There's no need for an oven or anything like that. As a magician, you have your own magician's method. Gretel opened 4 cocoa fruits at once and divided the cocoa beans into 4 parts. 3 portions were placed aside, waiting to be baked slowly at different temperatures. For the remaining portion, he directly threw a weakened version of Thirst Touch over. Can cause minor drying damage on contact and cause living creatures to lose water. Gretel has recently been practicing this spell to eliminate edema and deal with allergic symptoms such as laryngeal edema. Although the success rate of practice is not high and the mana output is often too strong, he feels very confident in dealing with these cocoa beans. Success. The cocoa beans are fully dried. The outer skin is so dry that it becomes brittle, and when you peel it off, it cracks. Gretel was so happy that he summoned 2 invisible servants and peeled off the seed coats of all the cocoa beans. Then let the invisible servants pound it, bake it, pound it even finer, bake it, grind it, bake it a 3rd time. Until it was ground into a slurry, which looked almost the same as in the video. He added the powdered sugar and stirred thoroughly to combine. In order to make chocolate, a grinder used for making magic potions was even used. Are you okay? Are you okay? Sarah kept turning around. One moment coming up with an idea, the next trying to help. Do you want to use wind blade technique to cut? Do you want to heat it up? Would you like some water, or milk? The grinder had been working for a long time. Gretel stopped the machine and poured out the chocolate that had been stirred into liquid form. Without waiting to pour it into the mold, Sarah jumped over and stretched out her finger to scrape on the edge of the grinder. Hey, it's much sweeter this time. She couldn't wait to take a lick. But it's still bitter. And it's still astringent. And it's still a little sour. Greet, can you make it more delicious? It seems that the temperature and time of baking and baking need to be controlled well. During the roasting process, will there be a Maillard reaction or some other reaction to eliminate the sour taste of cocoa beans? You cannot take it for granted and use Thirst Touch instead. Gretel paused. He threw the grinder to the silver dragon girl, and she could hold it and eat up all the chocolate, or throw a cleaning spell and clean it directly. I took another portion of cocoa beans and followed the instructions in the video without making any mistakes. Heat to 60 degrees and dry slowly for 4 hours, leave it to tailing to control, while Greet goes to read a book. Take it out, let it cool, then adjust to 150 degrees, dry for 20 minutes, turning the beans every 5 minutes. Let cool for 1 minute, then adjust to 135 degrees and bake for 5 minutes. Let cool for another minute, bake for 5 minutes, let cool completely. Hey! It doesn't smell sour. Sirara jumped over. Don't wait for the beans to cool down, then rub them with your hands. Before Gretel could say oh, she saw the hot beans cracking open in the palm of her white and slender palm, and the outer skin fell off, revealing the dark brown beans inside. That speed, that efficiency, is much faster than the invisible servant. The scariest thing is that Sarala was still smiling from beginning to end. Okay, the silver dragon's hands are not comparable to those of humans. And Sarala doesn't need any crushing, grinding, or grinding machines. She closed her palms together, and with a rustling sound, the cocoa beans turned into powder and fell. The efficiency was more than 100 times higher than that of Gretel's invisible servant, who had to knock and knock again and again. The only problem is that once the cocoa beans are ground fine enough, the cocoa butter inside will stick the powder together. Now, they are covered with a thick layer on Miss Silver Dragon's hands. Gretel? Can you eat it? Sirara licked her fingers and found that there was basically no sourness, but a special fragrance, and she quickly urged Greet. Greet looked at her fingers in a daze. You should pour all the cocoa powder into the pot first. Now ask me, how should I answer you? Do you want me to taste it on your hand? It should be almost done. He recalled the color and texture of the cocoa beans after they were fully ground in the video, and commanded unconfidently. Add powdered sugar. Add plenty of powdered sugar and a few grains of salt to avoid getting cloying later. Gretel set up a large pot, poured milk into it, and brought it to a boil over low heat. Then, he directed Sirala to pour a little hot milk, melt the chocolate, and pour down half a cup of milk. It tastes great. It has a special sweet aroma. Sirala held the cup in both hands and stood beside the pot, smiling so brightly that her eyes narrowed. Greet, this cocoa powder will be particularly comfortable to drink in winter. I don't want to write a case today, I want Gretel and Miss Silver Dragon to have some fun. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of asking for the last monthly ticket. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 508. After Gretel and Sarara, Aurora, Lynn, Master Norwood, and several apprentices came up to pour a glass. From formal mages to apprentices, everyone praised the sweet smell. Even Lynn, who was usually the most serious, was leaning in front of the fire, holding a cup and crossing her legs relaxedly. Only Bernard did not open his mouth to praise. The barbarian held an extra-large wooden cup, filled it with cocoa milk, raised his head, tons, 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 tons. Meow. A tiny meow sounded from the crowd. Bernard stopped, lowered his head, and saw Mr. Trochka turned into the size of a kitten, huddled next to his legs, head raised, golden eyes staring at him. Bernard put down the cup decisively, took out a large shallow plate, poured a plate of cocoa milk and put it on the ground. Mr. Trochka barked softly, wagged his tail at the savage, and lowered his head to lick it. Lynn. You can't do that. I usually don't lack anything to eat or drink from you. If I have a sip of milk, there will be a sip of milk for you, if there is a piece of bread from me, there will also be a piece of bread from you. As for asking others for food, Mr. Trochka, put it down. After Gretel finished drinking a glass of cocoa milk, he turned around and saw the black cat squatting over there licking the cocoa milk. His hair stood up for a moment. He put the cup down casually, ignoring the glass spinning on the table, jumped up and rushed towards it. Cats can't eat chocolate. Put it down. Put it down. Gretel spoke in a hurry, but Mr. Trochka turned a deaf ear to it. He buried his head and continued to lick the milk until his beard was covered with milk foam. It wasn't until Gretel rushed forward, squatted down, and stretched out his hand that his fingertips were only 0.1 centimeters away from the skin of his neck. Then he lay down and jumped out. The whole person, no, the whole cat turned into a black lightning, jumped out from Gretel's legs, and was behind him in an instant. Gretel turned around and ran away. One person and one cat ran around the big table in the restaurant twice, and Gretel finally blocked the black cat in the corner. He squatted down, stretched his hands forward, and strangled the black cat's neck. Spit it out. Spit it out. Cats can't eat chocolate. Meow dash. A much louder meow. Low, commanding, almost growl-like. Greet's vision went dark, and he was thrown to the ground by the black cat. He grew many times bigger. Mr. Trochka, who was already the size of a black panther, stepped on him, stuck out his tongue, and licked his face. I am the great Mr. Trochka. It's a monster. Not a black cat? Not a black cat. Don't limit me with the dietary taboos of black cats. Gretel was stepped on the ground by it, unable to move. The wet and sweet smell on his face hit his nostrils. After a while, the black cat jumped away. He wiped it with his hand, and the back of his hand was colorful. Ouch! Mr. Trochka! You licked my face full of milk. Cocoa, and cocoa-related foods, are well received by everyone. However, is it specific how to make it? Greet spread his hands. Otherwise, I will write down the method of processing cocoa beans, and Oro, will you let your cook try it? I really can't. Well, it is said that different types of cocoa beans, with different roasting times and roasting temperatures, will exhibit different flavors. Some are slightly sour, some are more bitter, some have a distinct burnt aroma, and some are said to have a nutty aroma, or a special floral aroma. Forgive me that Greet has never tasted it in his previous life. In his recipe, there are only dark chocolate, ordinary chocolate, white chocolate, and milk chocolate. But since there are gourmets advertising, I guess there must be some? However, if you ask Greet to try any of these types, processing techniques, and recipes, he will only shake his head very fast. Kill him, he would rather do anatomy experiments 12 hours a day. Cocoa milk tea, cocoa cake, cocoa bread, cocoa biscuits, handmade chocolate, milk chocolate, including the processing methods of cocoa beans. Gretel wrote 7 or 8 pieces of paper in one breath, sorted them out, and presented them to Aurora. Give it to you. No, leave it to your auntie the cook. Please be sure to try it out. The entire Mage Tower depends on her. If she really makes something good, I can even take it to the teacher as a tribute. Cyrilla followed him every step of the way. His eyes moved from the tip of Gretel's pen, to the thick stack of recipes, and then to Aurora's hands. He blinked and gave the blonde young mage a flattering smile. Well, Gretel has the most fresh ideas and is the most interesting, and you will never get tired of playing it. But if you want to eat delicious food, in addition to going to the steak restaurants one after another, the most correct way is to please Aurora's cook. By the way, Oro, after Auntie makes the things, remember to make a copy of the list and give it to Moss. That way we will have something to eat every day. Alas, although Moss can control invisible servants and can make a bunch of common dishes and snacks, it first lacks our \U0026D capabilities, and secondly, the things it makes are too standardized. If you want to eat delicious, fresh, and unique food, you still have to rely on artificial intelligence. However, it was rare that Greet was interested, or more importantly, it was rare that Gretel, the experimental and medical maniac, crawled out of his hospital. A group of people were very lively and simply held a small dinner. There is no need for Moss to control invisible servants to provide meals, and there is no need to go out to restaurants. Several magicians and apprentices rolled up their sleeves and each contributed a dish. Sirara caught a plump sea fish that was about half the height of a human, and froze it on the spot as it breathed out. She pulled out the elf scimitar, chopped off the head and tail, tore off the fish skin, and cut out the most juicy pieces of fish meat. Then, the swords were flying. Pieces of deep red fish meat with even fat lines inside are neatly arranged in a row. Miss Yinlong wiped the fish meat into the porcelain plate with a casual touch. After thinking about it, she grabbed a lemon at random, cut it in half with a knife, and placed it on the edge of the porcelain plate. What? The fish is still as frozen as ice? Let it go. Anyway, when other people's dishes are ready, they should be enough to thaw. Old God Lin An was sitting on the edge, motionless. In the kitchen, the golden skeleton kneaded dough, added butter, put cheese, ham, prawns, squid, shells, and various seafood, stuffing them into the oven to bake, and was busy. Hey, anyway, everyone has the same food, as long as it can be brought out when the time comes. As for who contributed, does it matter? Aurora squatted beside him pitifully and looked at him. Unlike Lin, who was fighting in the north and south and taking risks everywhere, Aurora was pampered and never fed herself. Lin An looked at him for a long time, couldn't help laughing, and gave him compassionate instructions. You go and cut some meat, you can use any meat, chicken, pork, or mutton. Cut it into knuckle-sized pieces, marinate it with sauce, and grill it on skewers. Well, if you're worried about it being too greasy, or you want to change it up a bit, as a trick, just skewer some vegetables between the meat. With one command and one movement, Aurora ran to work. Soon, he let out a scream. Where are the mushrooms? Why are there no mushrooms? My favorite mushroom. The mushrooms are here. Miss Anavia called back with a smile. She rummaged through the kitchen and found a bunch of various mushrooms and leafy greens. White mushrooms with stalks, straw mushrooms with round heads, dark-colored toadstools. As a patron of nature, the young priestess was very confident in her ability to identify mushrooms. She hummed softly and happily sliced, diced, and shredded the mushrooms, and stir-fried them with olive oil. Add salt, black pepper, and butter. Wash and blanch the green leafy vegetables, cook the peas, shred the cheese. Cut the bread into square, 1 cm square pieces, and bake in the oven until hard and crispy. Pour into a large bowl with mushrooms, green leafy vegetables, peas, and cheese, and mix well. Forest mushroom salad, ready to go. Of course, it is impossible to expect these dishes to feed everyone. If you want to measure the quantity, it depends on Bernard's ability. The barbarian waved 2 kitchen knives and Kangbang chopped 2 chickens, a large amount of beef, and a large amount of pork, and poured them all into the pot. Pour into a small half pot of potatoes, radishes, onions, sauerkraut, basil leaves, bay leaves, etc. on hand, and sprinkle a handful of whatever you catch. I opened another bottle of wine, and I didn't know which winery it was from or what flavor it was. I poured down half the bottle. Cover the pot and bring to a simmer. Hunter stew, let's go. The strange fragrance wafted out soon. Everyone was chatting and laughing, watching other people's work while cooking, and looking for opportunities to steal food. Of course, the most eyes are still on Gretel. What would he cook? This guy who has all kinds of fantastic ideas in research, is so in life, and can put anything into his mouth. What kind of surprise will he bring to everyone at this party? Greet stared at the vegetable basket in a daze. When it comes to making a specialty dish, the first thing he thinks of is lotus root and pork rib soup. Every winter, every household will bring out a big pot of it. Split the whole lotus root in half and then cut it into several sections. Each piece is as big as a palm. When you bite it, the lotus root can be all over your face. It is pink and glutinous and will melt in your mouth when you sip it with the tip of your tongue. The ribs, which are half a finger long, are put down without any expense, and the aroma of the meat can fill the whole room. The family just eats lotus root soup. Without other dishes, they can eat 2 big bowls of rice in one meal. However, there are no lotus roots here. 3 fresh bean curds? Forgive him for not being able to make tofu skin, but even if he could, there are no soybeans here. Hot noodles with sesame paste? Sorry, he doesn't know how to knead and roll noodles, so he can't make proper noodles. Soup dumplings. The reason is the same as above. He doesn't know how to make dough. If the dough is not made well, the steamed soup dumplings will probably turn out ugly. So what exactly do you do? It's not impossible to fool around with it, but once the haunting taste is evoked, it will always linger on the tip of the tongue. Gretel, what's wrong with you? At some point, Cyrilla had already knelt down beside him worriedly. The silver dragon girl stuck her head out, carefully observed his face, restrained her strength, and shook his arm back and forth. Don't you know how to cook? It doesn't matter if you don't know how to cook. I'll give you a piece of fish. Your knife is so good, you can just cut it up as you like. Yes, fish. Gretel's eyes lit up and he jumped up. Come and watch me cook you a fish to eat. 3,000 words. Another update completed. After eating, drinking, and having fun, we will continue to practice medicine tomorrow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the end of the month, don't hold on to your last monthly ticket. Give me. Give me. Thanks at Yunzai Jungzi fell down 0. Oh for the 500 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jia 2020. Chapter 509. My. I picked it up. Oro, don't grab it. Hiss, huh, it's so hot. A group of magicians gathered around a copper pot the size of a basin, each using their own unique tricks to get food out of the pot. The mage's hands picked up the snow-white fish fillets and fluttered them back to the owner's plate. The red soup was dripping and spilled all over the floor. Anivia stirred up the vines and picked up a lot of radish slices, lettuce slices, spinach, kale, cabbage, mung bean sprouts and pea sprouts that had just been spawned by magic. Of course, fish fillets are absolutely indispensable. Although Bernard doesn't know magic, the colander he holds in his hand is bigger than any other magician's hand. Gretel smiled as he watched them plunder. This lively and blustering look is very similar to his experience in college. At that time, a group of classmates were hungry and greedy, so they sneaked to the street at the back door of the medical school to have a meal together and have a toothpaste. At that time, boiled fish was very popular, so one dormitory would order a big pot and eat the fish fillets and all the side dishes inside. The soup in the fish fillets and vegetables drips down onto the rice. Just stir it up and you can eat a big bowl of it. If you divide it evenly, it doesn't cost much. After finishing the meal, everyone's face was glowing and they returned to school with bulging bellies. Speaking of which, the Mage Tower is also a learning and research institution, isn't it? This meal was extremely satisfying. In the end, everyone forced Greed to reprocess even the fish fillets prepared by Cyrilla and make them into boiled fish fillets. Well, it's always a bit weird to just start eating sashimi without wasabi or soy sauce, isn't it? However, extreme joy brings sorrow. Greed's boiled fish fillets are filled with a lot of chili peppers, and various kinds of peppers. It's spicy and refreshing when you eat it, and after you finish eating. The next day, Master Norwood carried everyone on his back, grinned, and slipped into Gretel's room. What's wrong? Greed smiled at the way he walked. This posture is familiar to him. In the anorectal department, there are a bunch of old men in skirts, everyone looks like this. Mr. Nordmark, I heard that you cured that child. Do you also know about? Greet held back her laughter and inquired carefully. The problem is not big, but constipation and bleeding hemorrhoids caused by eating too much spicy food. Greet directly threw a healing spell to temporarily stop the bleeding, and then, regarding the problem of constipation. How about you try this? He rummaged through it and found a bottle of glycerin. Insert the hollow vine into the rectum, push the syringe in, and instruct Master Norwood. Hold it. Hold it until you can't hold it anymore. After a while, Master Norwood came out of the bathroom with sweat profusely and relaxed, and thanked Gretel. Gretel took advantage of the situation and grabbed him. You're all here, do you want to check for hemorrhoids? Whether it's internal hemorrhoids, external hemorrhoids, or mixed hemorrhoids, I will perform surgery to ensure less bleeding and high efficacy. Anyway, it's easy to heal. It's just a matter of treatment. Are you really good at it? I heard from those guys in Black Crow Swamp that no one of them has cut it themselves. They often bleed profusely with just one cut. Hey, that's because they don't understand the anatomy at all. Gretel took matters into his own hands and smoothly cut off 2 meatballs for Master Norwood. While chatting, Gretel realized that there were not just 1 or 2 magicians suffering from constipation and hemorrhoids. Oh, constipation is not a disease. Being unable to pass is really fatal. It's very troublesome to drink castor oil, use soapy water for enemas every day, and wash with healing potion if bleeding occurs, even though it's just a potion to treat minor injuries. Greet nodded silently. Although he himself is not like this, many magicians spend the whole day reading and meditating. Lack of physical exercise, unhealthy diet, more meat, and less vegetables, no dietary fiber. If you are not constipated, who is? As for how to deal with constipation, would you like to take a bottle of this back to try? Greet put the glass bottle containing glycerin in front of Master Norwood. The middle-aged mage looked at the bottle, thought about it, and shook his head. Forget it, it's too troublesome. I don't know the magic of the natural gods, and those enema machines are also very awkward to operate. That. In Gretel's mind, an artifact from his past life naturally appeared. He casually released a silent phantom, pinched it left and right, and sketched out the appearance of a bottle of Kaislu. What do you think of this? Master Norwood looked intently. It is a small gadget that is as big as the palm of your hand. It has an elastic skin bag underneath, which can be easily pinched. The top is a thin tube, which is smooth and hard and will not bend when entering the human body. The head is round and blunt, and it will not hurt the delicate mucous membrane. The content is not much, only 20 ml in a skin bag, but based on Master Norwood's own experience in receiving treatment, it should be enough. It looks like it's very convenient to use alone. He evaluated it with the eyes of a transformation magician and pondered. The difficulty lies in the connection between the tube and the bladder. If the connection is not tight enough, it will pop out of the seam if you pinch it. If the connection is too tight, it will be more troublesome to refill it later. Wait, why are you connected? Together. Greet spread his hands. Kaislu, of course, is one piece. Who bothers with making a small skin bag and tying a tube? As long as he could remember, he had never seen a Kaislu that was not one piece. Gretel's face was full of confidence. Master Norwood went up and down, studied the silent phantom carefully for a while, and nodded gently. Well, if you use a metal pipe, the wall will be very thin and easy to be punctured. To be honest, wooden pipes are not easy to clean. If you use it again, you will feel dirty just thinking about it. Master Nordmark, look, can it be made with rubber? I have to ask you this. Gretel continued to be confident. I am not responsible for rubber research and development. I don't know the current project progress, the hardness, toughness, and elasticity of the products, or whether they will react chemically with the rubber. In the previous life, Kaislu used transparent plastic, not rubber. Therefore, the support Gretel can give Master Norwood is to wave his hand in a big way. Get more glycerin and try it. Anyway, this thing is not difficult to make, and it's not expensive either. If the attempt is successful, sales and other matters will be left to you, and the Mage Tower will take a share of the profits. Master Norwood held glycerin in his hand and left as ordered. Even if it is not to make money, but for your own convenience, you must work hard on research and development. This thing is so useful. He feels that with his physical condition, he can use at least 3 cans a month. Bring the rubber. Bring the rubber you made, Master Norwood shouted to the 2 apprentices. Use your mental power to shape it into the shape I specified, and then pour the liquid in the tube into it. The 2 apprentices started running in response. Rubber blocks, rubber sheets, rubber cylinders, rubber sheets, all of them were carried to Master Norwood. Several different kinds of rubber have been made in Master Norwood's laboratory, but they are still a little far away from Gretel's requirements. He drew the pattern, listed the dimensions and detailed requirements, and led the apprentices to try one by one, and finally made the finished product. Master Norwood was in no rush to sell. He first sent a small batch to Aurora and Lineage, and then took the finished products to visit his friends one by one. Every time you visit a house, you must tell Gretel's story. Did you know that the baby was born without an anus, and the mage Nordmark actually made one for him? I knew he could definitely cure it. That time I had constipation and bleeding, and I went to him for treatment because of the pain. He cured it in 3 or 2 strokes. Hearing that I was constipated, he gave me this thing again. Ugh, don't tell me, it's much more convenient to use. It's such a little thing. If you feel uncomfortable, you can use it with one hand. Isn't it more convenient than asking someone to give you an enema? Master Nordmark said that warm water is not effective, and soapy water and castor oil are not mild enough and can easily cause intestinal diseases. This medicine is mild in nature and very effective. You don't believe me, don't you believe Master Nordmark? He can even create an anus that doesn't exist. How can he not understand such a trivial matter? Just like that, I gave away a large circle of trial products. When Kaislu's popularity gradually spread, and 3 or 5 magicians would send messages a day to inquire about it, Master Norwood took his time and put the product on the shelves in the exchange area. It's not expensive, half a gold coin. It comes with a small fold-out page, printed with Master Nordmark's advice on treating constipation. 1. Drink more water, 1,500 to 2,000 ml a day. 2. Eat more vegetables and fruits, and exercise appropriately. 3. Develop the habit of defecation regularly and take a sitz bath with warm water after defecation. 4. If the bleeding doesn't stop, or there is prolapse of the flesh ball, or there is something else wrong, remember to seek treatment. At the end of the fold, the name and address of Oak Grove Medical Research Institute were printed. On the corner of the paper, the Institute's Red Cross logo shines red, which is particularly eye-catching at a glance. 200 copies were posted on the first day, and within 3 days, they were all sold out. The magicians were overjoyed. When something embarrassing happens in the future, I finally don't have to take off my pants, stick my butt out, and ask an apprentice or servant to help with an enema. Even if the bleeding is severe, there is still a place to treat it. Gretel didn't care about this from beginning to end. He gave Master Norwood considerable trust and responded to requests without interfering. Kaislu is made, okay. How to make glycerin, take it. If you need general treatment advice, no problem. As a doctor, you should write a popular science article. Glycerin is on the shelves. Got it? Remind me to settle regularly. So when magicians came to seek medical treatment one after another at the medical center, He only reacted belatedly. What happened? What happened? Why do you think I have become an anorectal surgeon who specializes in hemorrhoidectomy? What I specialize in is emergency surgery. I don't want to be a manure digger. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Please ask for the last monthly pass at the end of the month and the guaranteed monthly pass for next month. Thanks to @MagicalGirl Pika Meow for the 1000 starting coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 510. Whether he is good at removing hemorrhoids or working as a feces collector, no matter what, the reputation of Oak Grove Hospital has already been established. The people who come to seek medical treatment are finally not just the wealthy businessmen Greet knew before, not just the desperate poor people, and not just the sick people who are dying from the workhouse. Pauper. And the magicians are happy to give money. A bottle of potion to cure minor injuries costs 50 gold coins, a bottle of potion to cure moderate injuries costs 300 gold coins, and a bottle of potion to cure serious injuries costs 750 gold coins. You come to find a 5th level priest and mage dual professional, a disciple of the legendary mage, and receive his unique treatment. How dare you only give 300 gold coins? You have to pay 100 contribution points anyway, or again if you don't have enough money, you can consider using any strange magic materials or magic equipment to offset your account. Greed would not ask them for money, but the patient's face was more important. In any case, if a magician treats your butt, he still has a bright future, and may meet you on other occasions, then, for your own honor, you'd better pay more for the consultation. As a result, Greet's Oak Grove Medical Research Institute actually managed to break even with this. Moreover, other types of patients for whom treatment has failed have begun to come to our door. At noon that day, Gretel raised his head from a bloody buttocks and was asked out before he could use the cleansing technique. The middle-aged man sitting and standing in the lobby kept pacing back and forth with an anxious look on his face. In the center of the area where he was pacing, a thin old woman sat tremblingly, muttering. "It's not cured, we'd better not be cured, it's said that this family can cut people with knives. It's bloody and scary." "Mother," the man interrupted anxiously. "He is tall and strong, with a straight back and thick calluses on his hands. He is a warrior at first glance." Greet couldn't tell the specific level yet, but Bernard had already rushed over and stood next to Greet, never leaving. The old woman winced again. Gretel waved his hand to the barbarian, stepped forward with a smile, and bowed slightly in front of the old woman. "Old lady, what's wrong with you?" "My mother has a terrible stomachache. It hurts and feels bloated." When the man said this, his voice suddenly became quieter, as if he didn't want the people around him to hear. "The person who took care of her said that she hasn't had a bowel movement in 2 days, this has been the case several times before. Drinking healing potions is of no use, and taking her to the temple for treatment can only make her better for a few days. It has been particularly serious recently, Mr. Master." "You?" "Constipation, abdominal pain, bloating. First consider intestinal obstruction. As for the severity and cause, and whether there are any other organic diseases, it needs to be determined after examination. Moreover, constipation has a lot to do with living habits, and it cannot be solved once and for all by applying magic." Gretel thought like this, put on a friendly smile on his face, and reached out to help the old man. "Old lady, let's check first. Stand still here. Yes, stand up straight, don't move. Tisk, I can't see clearly here. Moreover, the key parts cannot be seen clearly." The heavy shadow on the waist looked like a key or something else at first glance. Sewing needle? Scissors? A screwdriver? Flintstones? After failing to rub Apia's fallen horns, Gretel could only help the old lady into her consulting room, and called 2 female nurses to come in and help the old lady change her clothes first. Take off all the metal objects under the clothes, no matter if they are buttons, belts, keys, or other weird things, and give them to her son. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Greet took the time to chat a little more with the patient's family. Only then did I know that the old lady was 62 years old and had given birth to 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. No, gender does not matter. The person who brought her here was the old man's eldest son, a 6th level knight. Of course, the old man himself was not a professional. The old man is usually in good health and has never had any serious illness or surgery. Patient's family, what is the surgery? I like to eat meat and vegetables. As long as I am not constipated, I can eat 1 pound of vegetables a day. After talking about this, the nurse who was waiting for the old lady to change her clothes was sweating profusely. She opened the door and came out. It was obvious that she had spent a lot of time talking. Gretel was able to get rid of the knight, took out the endless ink pen, and gave the old man another X-ray. It's good to have a portable light source. Greet silently gave detection magic a thumbs up. In the previous life, the doctor would write an order, push the patient to line up, pay the fee, line up in the imaging department, take the film, and then push it back to wait for the imaging department to release the film. It's a lot of back and forth, and if it's not urgent, it will disappear in a few hours. He looked carefully. On the upright plane radiograph, multiple stepped air fluid levels were seen in the abdomen, the proximal expansion of the small intestine was obstructed, and the air fluid level was fixed above the pubic bone in the pelvis. On the supine plane radiograph, these signs did not change. Moreover, in the inguinal part, which should be outside the ligament, you can see an inflated intestinal curve, with the blind end pointing towards the obturator. After all inspections of both positions were completed, Gretel already had a rough idea in his mind. He asked the old lady to lie down and prepare for a physical examination. Old lady, you curl up your legs, okay, that's it? Come on, curl up your right leg too. Gretel stood by the bed, speaking softly under the gaze of the old lady's son. He leaned forward, put his left hand on the old woman's right calf, and pushed it gently to guide her. Before he even exerted any force on his hand, the man already said ouch. No, no, no. Mother said that whenever her right leg is curled up, her thigh hurts. Greet nodded secretly, as expected. The smile on his lips remained unchanged and he asked slowly. How long have your thighs been hurting? Not long, just a little bit. The old woman's eyes were evasive, and she glanced at her son after saying a few words. Gretel has seen him like this a lot, and he probably has something to hide from his son. Well, it was most likely serious. I didn't want to disturb my son, so I didn't tell him. Greet thought for a moment, persuaded the knight to leave the consulting room, came back, and continued questioning. Only then did I realize that the old lady had been suffering from constipation for more than 2 years, with relief and recurrence. As for the pain in my right thigh, I have had it for more than half a year, and it has been particularly severe in the past few days. I can't bend my right leg at all. When I bend it, it becomes more and more painful. Old lady, can you feel a lump in the groin of your right leg, which is the junction between your body and your right leg? What? The old woman's voice suddenly rose. After being sharp for a while, he lowered his voice again, a little panicked and even coy. How can you, a young man like you, ask about a place like that? Gretel didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this stage of the consultation, he has already focused on the intestinal obstruction caused by obturator hernia. For older women who have given birth multiple times, the pelvic floor muscles and ligaments will degenerate more. Long-term constipation will put greater pressure on the pelvic floor muscles and ligaments. At this time, if the peritoneum is relatively sparse and there are gaps, and the pelvic floor muscles and ligaments are not supporting it, it will cause part of the intestine to herniate, causing incomplete intestinal obstruction. Because the obturator canal is narrow and the surrounding tissue is tough, it is difficult for the hernia contents to be retracted on its own. This, if we don't know the cause of the disease, and the temple's treatment only targets constipation and pain, it's really not easy to cure. I didn't mean to take advantage of you, old lady. In the name of the God of nature. He sighed, reached out and took out the oak staff from his pocket, and liberated it into the shape of a stick with eyebrows. The green leaves on the head of the staff sway gently. Greet raised a hand, and placed the palm flat on the side of the ear, from the palm to the fingertips. The white light beat slightly. Old lady, I'm really just asking this to diagnose the disease. If you're worried, could I ask your son to come in and stay by your side, or ask a female priest to come over? The credibility of the God of nature seems to be really high. The old lady stared at the white light for a while, then looked at the green leaves on the top of the oak stick, and her face finally relaxed a little. Gretel quickly struck while the iron was hot. Old lady, let me turn my back to you, touch it yourself, touch it carefully. This is very important. There was a rustle behind him, a rustle behind him. After a while, the old lady breathed a sigh of relief and replied in a low voice. No. No. But it can be seen on plain X-rays. Gretel rubbed his eyebrows. Trouble. In order to confirm the intestinal obstruction, and more importantly, to confirm the arterial and venous compression and the blood supply of the lower limbs, it is best to do a B ultrasound. I don't know if the other party is willing to touch her. Alas, although Cyrilla and Anavia both learned the method of ultrasound exploration from him, they were still not good at reading images. He can only do it by himself. Greet communicated with the old lady, but was rejected as expected. She opened the door and communicated with her son, but was also rejected. In desperation, he could only propose a surgical plan. First of all, we need to make an opening in the groin, stretch a few veins in, and push the fallen intestine back to its original position. Then we need to explore the intestine. The obstruction is so long, so don't let it cause ischemia, necrosis, and so on. Finally, fill up the gap in the peritoneum. When he said this, the old lady's face turned pale. Later, he was shaky and almost fainted. He leaned on his son and shook his head desperately. We won't be cured, Albert, we won't be cured, we won't be cured. Greet tried his best to explain, including explaining that the whole process is under the control of tranquilization. You will not feel pain, and if the operation is not performed, the intestines may rot. None of them had any effect. Alas, the old lady is too fearful and has poor compliance. In the end, Albert Knight just bought 2 tubes of Kaiselu and left in a hurry with his mother. Greet walked from the consulting room to the entrance of the hall, and then down the steps. He grabbed Albert Knight and repeatedly warned. If the old lady has severe stomach pain, remember to get treatment. You must get treatment. You can come to me, any temple, any magician's medical institute. In the most serious case, the intestines will rot. It fell. I will stay here tonight. True to his word, he would not go back to the Mage Tower tonight and would stay directly in the hospital. Sleeping until midnight, at 1 or 2 in the morning, Albert Knight took his mother and knocked on the door of Oak Grove Hospital. Mage Nordmark. Mage Nordmark, are you there? Help. The 5th 10,000 reward will be added. There is only one last update left, and it's all paid off. From the beginning of the month to the end of the month, there were 29 days of additional updates this month. Please subscribe, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, and ask for all kinds of Looking for the last monthly pass at the end of the month and the guaranteed monthly pass for next month. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 511. Master Mage. Mage Nordmark, help. Coming. With a bang, the door opened. Gretel rushed out wearing a strange short-sleeved dress and a white robe. He only took one look, turned around and rushed in. Bernard. Lift people. Send them directly to the operating room. I'll brush my hands. With a clicking sound, the silver rods blessed with the eternal flame opened their covers one after another. Looking from a distance at this moment, I can see the brightly lit hospital in the dark night, like a beacon of life in despair. Bernard bursts out with a barbarian security guard. Pick up the semi-conscious old man, put it on a stretcher, one person at a time, and carry him away. With great strides, Albert Knight followed behind, chasing after him with all his strength, but he almost couldn't catch up. He ran all the way to the door of the operating room. In the distance, I heard a clear female voice complaining in the operating room. Procrastinate, 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 procrastinate. Originally, laparoscopy was enough, but now we have to open the abdomen. Originally, there was no need to cut the intestines, but now we have to do it. Why bother waiting for him here if you don't go back to the mage tower in the middle of the night? Woolen cloth. Don't be like this, Cyrilla. The person who answered was the Nordmark mage who had met him during the day. He smiled gently and said in a soft voice. It's normal for patients to be afraid and for patients' families to have doubts. As healers, we just need to try our best to save the patient's life. As long as you have a good temper. What? Want to cut your intestines? Knight Albert froze, feeling scared and secretly ashamed. He followed the stretcher and rushed straight in, wanting to find the mage, apologize and thank him, ask him about his situation, and ask him to treat his mother. Unexpectedly, before he rushed into the operating room, a heavy wooden door slammed in his face, almost flattening the tip of his nose. Next to the door of the operating room, stood a barbarian security guard who was a head taller than him. He stretched out his arm to stop him and said in a loud voice. Don't go in. This. Knight Albert paused and looked up at the red light on top of the gate, feeling a war between heaven and man in his heart. He wanted to rush in desperately, but he was afraid that he would anger the mage and stop seeing his mother. Fortunately, after a moment, the door opened and Gretel quickly walked out. You're too late. At the first sentence, Knight Albert's feet were weak and he almost fell down. Gretel did not help him, and continued talking on his own. Preliminary estimation is that your mother's illness has progressed to intestinal perforation, toxins have entered the blood, and there may be partial intestinal necrosis. The most suitable treatment method at present is to open the abdominal cavity to explore, clean out the intestinal contents, and may require the removal of part of the intestinal tract. Do you really want to cut it? There is a difference between hearing something through a wall and being told face to face. Knight Albert trembled. Before he could ask, he heard even more terrifying news. Because the toxins have entered the blood, the elderly are old and have poor recovery. Even if the abdomen is opened and the intestines are removed, they may not be able to save them. What? Albert Knight almost jumped. Cut open the stomach and remove the intestines, or is it possible that it cannot be saved? So why bother with surgery? If you die, you will die, and your stomach will be cut open bloodily. Gretel had seen this reaction many times in his previous life. Time was urgent and he had no time to continue persuading. He just leaned forward with concern and spoke faster. It's up to you to decide whether you want to have surgery or not. If you understand the risks and still agree to the surgery, sign here. The sooner you decide, the less likely you will be saved. As he spoke, He took out a risk notification form, walked quickly to the small table next to him, and put it on the table. Knight Albert was in a state of confusion. He stared at Greet's eyes for a moment, and anxiously, he lowered his head to find the place to sign. I'll sign. Where can I sign? Luckily, this guy makes decisions very quickly. With a flourish, Gretel grabbed the notice, turned around and ran back to the operating room. While brushing his hands, he raised his voice from a distance. Cyrilla, tranquility. Leon. Disembowel. Okay. After practicing with him for several months, Leon Carlos's surgical skills have reached the point where he can perform laparotomy independently. At least, midline incision is no problem. Cut the skin, cut the superficial fascia, and cut the abdominal linea alba. Greet came over after brushing his hands and saw that he had opened up the abdomen layer by layer, exposing the mess of the old lady's abdominal cavity. What to do next? Attract. Hey, at this time, we should be more flexible. Cleaning technique. One application of the mage's trick, the cleansing spell, can clean items within 1 cubic foot. It is just right for cleaning the feces in the abdominal cavity. Gretel said as he manipulated the mage's hand to bring a bucket over. If it is a piece of dirty clothes, a piece of leather, or a piece of wall, it seems that the dirt that has been cleaned has disappeared into another dimension, but in fact, it is just thrown into the corner because it is too small. Unobtrusive. But like now, with a belly full of feces, the mage who throws cleansing spells had better be aware of it. Get a bucket and continue, otherwise, the cleaning technique will let you know what it means to work hard. After 3 or 5 cleaning operations in a row, the feces that leaked out due to intestinal perforation were swept away and all fell into the bucket. The stench was permeating the air, but luckily everyone on the scene was wearing a bubble technique, and everyone, including the barbarian security guard in the corner, remained calm. Spells are so convenient. Gretel gave himself a thumbs up. After the cleansing operation, all feces and blood were removed. When we looked at the abdominal cavity, at first glance, we saw a section of intestine about 30 to 40 centimeters, which was obviously different from the surroundings. Under the shadowless lamp, that section of intestine was blue-purple in color, much darker and thicker than the surrounding area. By visual inspection, the diameter is at least twice that of the nearby intestine. Look, Greet flew out the mage's hand, pointed at this intestine, and lectured the students. With this look, you can tell at a glance that there is too much feces in the intestine. In addition, there is strangulation or something underneath, which blocks the section, and the intestinal wall is extremely dilated and thinned. With this color, the intestine is already necrotic, in other words, it has begun to die. Based on his more than 10 years of experience in the emergency department, it is basically impossible to save the patient just by covering him with warm saline gauze. Treatment alone may not bring it back. For now, the safest approach is to remove the intestines. However, the elderly are old and thin. Removing such a long section of intestine will definitely affect the absorption of nutrients in the future. In other words, the quality of life in the future will definitely be reduced, and may even affect lifespan. Is there any way to save it? Is there any way to restore the vitality of the intestine without removing it? Gretel reached out and touched the intestines in front of him. Although it has expanded and changed color, its elasticity is still there. The intestines are moist. When you press it down slightly, the color becomes slightly lighter, and when you release it again, it becomes slightly darker. There is also a blood supply. Although, it is only a very small and insignificant blood supply. Give it a try, he said to himself, give it a try. Anyway, the worst thing is to remove the intestines. Anyway, the old lady's life is being watched by Cyrilla and the healing skills are there. Gretel flew out of the mage's hand and clamped both ends of the normal colored intestine, leaving a gap of about 5 centimeters. Clamp the mesenteric artery and mesenteric vein, then reach out for a scalpel and cut them off in one go. The scalpel blessed with devilized weapon was extremely sharp. With just a slight swipe, the intestines, which were almost extremely thin, had already split open. Before the excrement could pour out, Gretel pointed the tip of his knife at the crack and threw a series of spells at it. Cleaning technique. Cleaning technique. Cleaning technique. Very good. The feces is cleared from the intestines and plops into the bucket. Although the section of intestine that was cut was deflated and no longer dilated, it was not torn. Very good. From this point of view, the mechanism of action of cleaning technique is to remove dirt from the user's cognition. Because he believed that this section of necrotic intestine could still be saved, not only was it not removed, it even suffered no additional damage. Now it depends on the blood supply. If the blood supply can be restored, this section of intestine will be considered alive and there will be no need to cut it. However, the opposite happened. Greet completed the anastomosis of the intestines, carefully released the mesenteric blood vessels, covered them with warm saline gauze, and went to deal with other nearby intestines. Make an incision, throw out the cleaning technique, clean up the feces, and treat the anastomosis, cut another section, throw out the cleaning technique, clean up the feces, and treat the anastomosis. After 5 or 10 minutes, I found that the purple color of my intestines had not improved, and had even gotten worse. Do you really want to cut it? After all the work done before, it still cannot be saved. Does it still have to be removed? Gretel stared at the bruised intestine in front of him with a serious expression. Under the shadowless light, above the mask, his brows knitted tightly. Cyrilla stood opposite the operating table and wanted to reach out to smooth his brow. She stopped halfway and asked cautiously, "Gretel, how about I try throwing in a few more healing spells? Without blood supply, even healing techniques can only last for a while, and it is impossible to bring the dead back to life." Greet shook his head slightly, but what he said was, "Wait a minute, I'll think about it again, think about it again. How to restore blood supply? The intestines are no longer extremely dilated, and the blood supply has not yet been restored. There is probably a blood clot, throw a hemolysis spell. For example, the necromancy spell that prevents blood from coagulating." Gretel tried to cast the spell. However, it was obvious that that spell could only target blood, not blood clots. Greet thought for a while and threw another remove disease. The magic light passed by without any reaction. The spell to remove disease does not seem to recognize the thrombus in the intestinal feeding blood vessel as a disease. If we were in modern times, we might try thrombolysis. Greet once saw a genius doctor who inserted a catheter from the hepatic portal vein into the splenic vein, superselected it into the mesenteric vein, injected urokinase, and succeeded in thrombolysis. The erratic mesentery was difficult for his guide wire to penetrate. But now, let alone he doesn't have a guide wire, even if he can use a vine instead, he doesn't have urokinase. Etc. Gretel's face turned serious. Although he does not have urokinase, he has various magical arts and magic. Maybe, you can try it again? This genius doctor is Dr. Joe Kongwin in Become a Doctor Back to 2002, Chapter 643, Can Dissolve. A big tribute to the real Bear Como. Please subscribe, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, and ask for all kinds of. Looking for the last monthly pass at the end of the month and the guaranteed monthly pass for next month. Thank you for the reward of 3,000 starting coins when you are tired and go back to sleep. Thank you for the 500 starting coins reward.